lines for the 990 sort of as we are looking at it and interpreting it. And we hope that you all take these big takeaways with you in your reporting. The first is that, and we've said this already multiple times this past week, but we are the largest Black abolitionist philanthropic organization to have ever existed in this nation's history. What we are doing has never been done before on this scale. The second thing is our organization's finances are strong despite the negative press, despite the accusations. Black Lives Matter is financially sound and healthy, and we have been good stewards of the people's donations. But of course, there are decisions that are being interrogated, and it's important to interrogate these types of decisions, but it cannot come from a pathology that believes Black people don't deserve access to money and power. When we look at this 990, we also see that, when you look at Charity Navigator, for example, which is an organization that is a watchdog for nonprofits, and how they score 990s, from looking at programmatic expenses to administrative expenses to fundraising efficiency, we are consistently above the highest rating in all of those categories, which is a really big deal. And so this means that we are at the top of the class as it relates to nonprofit organizations. The last thing is we are continuing to evolve from an organization that has been consistently boxed into talking about Black death, looking at Black death, responding to Black death. And we are evolving into what it means to celebrate the fullness of Black life, the things that we live for and the things that keep us safe. Some of the financial top lines of the 990, as I just mentioned about the financial health, overall less than 10% of the costs that are associated for this time frame of the 990, less than 10% were dedicated to overhead and operational expenses, which is in stark contrast to the 30% in overhead costs from organizations that get A ratings from the nonprofit watchdog organizations like GuideStar. Over $25 million has been reinvested into the Black community. I'm gonna say that again because that is a big number. Over $25 million has been reinvested into the Black community. That broken down represents over 10 million in grants to Black-led frontline organizations, truly doing the work of abolition on the ground. Over 13 million in grants to Black Lives Matter chapters. We have always been an organization that has agitated and protested, and the Black Lives Matter chapters are continuing to do that. And we are happy to continue making investments into that work. Nearly $3 million have gone out in grants to impacted family foundations. $3 million has gone out in direct relief to Black people who were struggling during COVID when the administration was not providing stimulus checks. And of course, that overhead costs includes the purchase of the $5.9 million property, which has been reported on widely, which is part of our art and culture component of the organization and serves as our Black Joy, as our creators house for the Black Joy Creators Fellowship. So despite our past efforts, we know that there is absolutely more work to do to increase transparency and to ensure that transitions in leadership are abundantly clear. I want to just end by talking about some of the things that we've learned. As a new board, we don't just begin by getting to work. We have to take stock of where we have been in the last 2 years to get to the point of obviously where we're going. And that's both positive and negative. We have learned that organizations that experience the explosive growth that we did in 2020, growth that we weren't expecting, growth that we were not prepared for, that those types of organizations, our organization should get the support, should have gotten the support that it needed to contend with what really were complicated compliance systems that are intentionally designed for an organization like ours not to succeed. We learned that the world reacts to our autonomy and our power with increased scrutiny and higher standards. There will continue to be vulnerabilities that we must protect ourselves against. We learned that this past weekend. And lastly, we learned that the antidote to the white supremacy we are experiencing and seeing is building even more community and deepening our relationships, like the relationships we hope to deepen with all of you. And so thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to Dejane to take us through the next part of our program.
Awesome, thank you, Shalomi.
I'm experiencing some challenges here in Dejane. Is that true across the board?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe try turning off your camera, Dejane, if you can hear us. Computer love.
Okay, a little bit. Yeah, try. Can you hear me now? I can log off and log back on. Okay, one moment. Sorry about that.
We can hear you, Dejane.
Okay, as long as it's not glitchy right now. Yes. Okay. Okay, so Shalomia talked a bit about what we learned, but I want to add to that. We also learned that there is no training and no support for Black movement leaders and activists to move from organizing to running nonprofit organizations, which is a difficult skill set in its own, to go from being on the ground to trying to build the largest foundation in the world. The biggest takeaway from all of this, and one that I was most happy to learn, is that the organization is in excellent fiscal shape. There are some within the organization, within movement community, platforms. So Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation. Creating vulnerability for our entire.
I see Dejane turned off her camera. Dejane, you want to try again with your camera off?
Movement. That is why we're emphasizing that we have to find.
I think I'm probably gonna pick up on some of the things that I know.
Ways to work.
We can just mute her mic.
And the right relationships with each other. We want to be clear that we are accountable to, despite what the right wing.
Okay, I think Dejane might be muted. I'm so sorry about that, y'all. Please forgive our technical problems. What I know Dejane was going to speak about in particular was the Creators House. And I know we're going to have some time for all to answer some questions or ask some questions and answer those. And while she and I joined the board after the Creators House was purchased, we have been doing our due diligence. We have been there with attorneys to look at the space ourselves. And what we've learned, to my original point, is that we remain committed to Black people, and we want to be committed to the entire diaspora of Black people. Having a physical space for Black artists and leaders to feel safe, collaborate, imagine, experiment is an investment in our culture. We know that the arts and creativity, which is a part of our mission, are inextricably linked to our liberation, from songs of enslaved people to the Harlem Renaissance. The arts has always been a part of who we are as Black people and what we do. And so the Creators House was purchased as a space of our own, with the intention of providing housing and studio space for recipients of the Black Joy Creators Fellowship, in service to Black culture and to the movement. That fellowship, it does provide recording services, there's dedicated office space, and the intention is that Black creatives will have an opportunity to launch online content. You know how important it is to manage our own media and tell our own stories, that examine our real lives, focused on abolition and healing justice and urban agriculture, food justice, pop culture, activism, politics. Particularly during the height of the pandemic, numerous art spaces closed and financial programs were cut. And so there was a void in the artist community. My understanding is that the Creators House was intended to continue that long tradition of providing housing for creative artists trying to work outside the systems of capitalism and oppression, and to bring truth, hope, and new dreams to the world. It has been used as a safe house for Black leaders. So our hope is to start this conversation and to continue the work, because the right is counting on us to fold. They said so much in an article just last week, claiming that certain changes foreshadowed our demise. They have been wrong then, and I'm here to tell you that they are wrong now. We just launched a new transparency center where our 990s are posted, along with other updates to the organization's policies and board membership, which will continue to grow in the next several months. In the coming weeks, we're going to be announcing new measures to bring in staff, continued investments to the stewards to without depleting resources at the same time. We hope all this information is helpful and gives you more insight to our current circumstances. And we look at this as a way to deepen our relationship and build real power together. One last item for you before we move to the Q&A. First, I want to make sure you all have the URL. It's in I believe it's in the chat to the Transparency Center. It's Black Lives Matter /transparency. We're going to continue to build that out. If you all have any additional questions that we don't answer or don't get to, we don't have unlimited time here as much as I wish we did, please email press@blacklivesmatter.com. With that, we are happy to answer some questions.
Great. So if members of the media, if you have questions, please just go ahead and raise your hand and we will bring you on screen and unmute you to ask your question. And I should also say you should have the ability to raise your hand. Okay, there we go.
Hey folks, how you doing?
How you doing, brother? I see you're driving.
Yeah, I'm in Texas. First off, I got several questions, but first, how many board members are there? There are 3 of you right now, but how many total board members do you have?
Three in total. You were looking at all 3 of us, and we have plans to expand our board up to 9 over the coming year.
Okay. Second thing is so actually, before I even get to that question, I appreciate you talking about the relationship with Black media. I understand why you gave Associated Press the exclusive, because it's AP. But that's also the example of where also working with Black-owned media, some of us are members of Associated Press. And so we could have literally, that story could have been given to Black-owned media and we could have actually had it placed on the Associated Press wire. So I'm all about making sure that we also get exclusives. And so just understand that that could have been achieved the same way with a Black-owned media outlet. Just want to let y'all know that. The thing that what is the hierarchy? When I had Patrice on my show last year, we went through this, and I am still, and I think this is part of the problem, completely confused with the hierarchy. You're the global foundation. So you have the activist piece that Melina is over. Who controls the social media? So when Black Lives Matter is speaking, part of the deal is who's speaking? Is it the foundation? Is it the activist piece? You have all of these different pieces. So are you going to provide a flow chart so we understand exactly what this whole thing is? Because even to me, it is still greatly confusing. Who's who does what, who's over what, stuff along those lines.
Yeah, I can maybe take a first stab at that. Others, please chime in. I think to your first piece, yes, we intend on ensuring that our relationship with Black media outlets remain strong. And Roland, we will, I think we got some announcements in the pipeline that we want to be able to work with you on in terms of getting out to our community. And so thank you for that reminder. But the BLM ecosystem went through a transformation in 2020. The global network, there was one organization for Black Lives Matter, which was the Global Network, and we had all of the chapters connected to the global network. And when Patrice stepped back in, essentially a main part of her tenure was around reorganizing and restructuring the BLM ecosystem. And how that happened was the foundation, of course, understanding that we need to be able to resource the front lines and build Black power and ensure that we are disrupting philanthropy for Black people. The foundation has turned into that as mentioned, the largest abolitionist philanthropic foundation organization that has ever existed in the nation's history. Our sibling organization, BLM Grassroots, was formed, and that was really at the request of the BLM chapters having autonomy and over their own resources and budgets in order to do that. The work on the front lines was really important. And so BLM Grassroots was formed, and to your point, my dear sister Melina Abdullah is the director of BLM Grassroots. And so they do the frontline organizing on behalf of Black Lives Matter. And then separately, Black Lives Matter PAC was formed, in which we thought about what it means to build Black power in the halls of Congress and across state houses and local municipalities around the country. And what does it look like to bring the demands from the streets to the halls of power? And so that part of the BLM ecosystem really focuses on electoral work. And so those are the three different sibling entities of Black Lives Matter, sort of as it relates to us. But of course, the idea, the movement, Black Lives Matter is much bigger than just three organizations. We've got hundreds of abolitionist-focused grassroots organizations across the ecosystem, and obviously so many other Black-led organizations. And but just wanted to provide that education on how our ecosystem transformed in 2020.
Since I'm someone who is learning as well, Roland, I want to also chime in from the perspective of the way that I see it. Shalomia mentioned the full ecosystem, so you can think about three separate entities. The Global Foundation, that is the foundation that we are talking about today. That's the 990s. That's the one who has now a 501c3. That is the one that we are committing to transparency, accountability. We have 3 board members. When you go to Black Lives Matter on Instagram, We are running that account. I'll answer that very clearly, although we have had relationships with all of our chapters and grassroots, which is reflected in those chapters. So that's the second arm, so that they too can post and speak to the masses through that account. And then the third arm is the PAC. So we've got the foundation, we've got grassroots, which is the chapters, and we have the PAC.
Okay. Roland, if we need to bring you back on to follow up, we certainly will. And so let's go to Lauren.
How's everybody doing? Thanks for doing this. Can you guys tell me, moving forward, who exactly the face and the spokesperson of Black Lives Matter is going to be? Have you made that decision? That's question one. And two, as you know, so much of the money that came in, just talked about so much, came in after obviously the death of George Floyd. And so much of what the history of Black Lives Matter has been about has been the deaths of Black men at the hands of police. But the organization's goal seems to have been going away from that issue of Black men being the victims of police violence. So can I just ask you, what is your top three issues? What are the top three things that Black Lives Matter will be focusing on moving forward? Thanks a lot.
Hi, Dejanay here. I'll take a stab at this question and say that as Shalomia uplifted, we're not moving away. We understand that Black death is the thing that started this organization, but we really want to uplift Black life. And this foundation is serving on all aspects, understanding that death is a part of life, but within living, you know, there's a lot of other things that we as Black people are struggling with by living in this country and through systematic oppression. So the organization is not leaving, or is no longer focused on the station violence, but we're also uplifting and wanting to assure that Black life is also filled with joy, that we're able to kind of be the bridge between the things like Shalomia mentioned, giving out stipends during the pandemic when the government wouldn't to our people. We want to make sure that we're able to give life as well, and that everyone is flourishing and happy as Black people, and be able to see joy, and not only just the deaths. The deaths are very triggering as well. You know, a lot of times we see these deaths and then there's nothing in place for us to heal from that. And so we're really the foundation's goal is to balance that.
Yeah, I love that, Dejanay, thank you. I started out by saying I'm the mother of 3 Black sons, right? And so the issue of Black men dying at the hands of state-sanctioned violence is certainly important to me, as it is to other board members. In fact, about 30 minutes before this call, when we were getting ready to get on this Zoom, I got a call from my son, who took my car to go to the store, to tell me he was pulled over by the police. 30 minutes before this call. And through my shaking and through my tears and coaching him through, I recognized that we have to be more than reactive, right? We have to be proactive. And so our strategy as a foundation is about not only being proactive as it relates to our initiatives, but our governance. As board members, we have a duty of loyalty, a duty of obedience, and a duty of care to this foundation. And so what that means is that while today we may not have all the answers about what's going to happen in the future, it doesn't mean that we won't. We have to vote. We're taking minutes now. We are doing things that legitimate board members and boards do when they run organizations. And so that means we may not have all of the answers today, but through conversations that we're having, through listening, through being on the ground, through listening to our own children and our own family members who may be on the inside or being pulled over by police, we are building and growing this foundation. There are, though, 5 strategies that, if I could just keep going a little bit, because I want to give you all some meat to answer this question, that we've identified to be priorities. The first is policy. So we are going to align how our tax dollars are spent with the investments we need to keep our communities safe and thriving. And we're going to center transparency as a core value to that work. We are going to, bring up examples about what's happening in grassroots and on the front lines to make Black liberation real and build support for Black futures right now. The second is research and education. So we will fund and conduct research on philanthropic models. I've worked in philanthropy for over a decade in my previous experiences. And so we're going to interrogate and question and challenge those existing models of white philanthropy and research the ways our ancestors built community to dream up what is possible for Black Lives Matter's funding structures. I don't know if any of you have Googled the top philanthropic organizations in this country. I'll tell you, none of them are Black in terms of community organizations. You need $100 million to even get on that list, right? Why is that? It's time for us to do something about it and ensure that the promise that we made when we accepted those dollars out as a foundation is fulfilled. A lot of people are talking about the potential of the money. I think Dejanay and Shalomia will agree that there's no dearth of emails or calls that we've received from people telling us what we need to do. And yes, the potential is important, but the promise is also very important. And I'm here to be accountable for that, as we all are. So that's policy, education, and research. Third is grassroots. We want to continue to build out a Rolodex of Black abolitionists working with grassroots and other organizations to identify multi-decade strategies to invest in their work. The fourth is arts and culture. I talked about that earlier. Artists visioning ideas, bringing cutting edge artistry together, not necessarily just to create a project or a product, but to create new ideas, inventions, strategies around the world. So arts and culture is fourth. And then finally, investment. And this is one I know a whole lot about. As a foundation, we are building a theory of change to disrupt philanthropy. We're prioritizing the things that I mentioned, and we are dismantling very real barriers in the nonprofit industrial complex to invest in Black-led frontline organizations to defend the police, defend our communities, and invest in them. And if you take a look at our 990s, even before we came on board, you'll see the top 3 areas. In those, one of them is healing justice. The arts and culture is the other. You'll see that if you go through the 990s. And all those things will remain true. It's just that our strategy has these 5 points that I've just recognized that we're building upon to move us forward. I know that was long-winded, but there's a lot that I've learned, a lot that I've read, and there's certainly a lot to come. This is serious business for us. And we don't take it lightly, and we're doing everything that we can to be accountable to our community.
Thank you so much, Cicely. We can bring up our next question. Oh, I see it in the chat. I apologize. But I see Roland has come up, so I'll get to the chat in just a sec, but we'll go to Roland first.
Okay, this is why I'm going back. So there are 3 separate entities, but do you control all 3? Because when I hear separate entities, so you have the PAC, you have the grassroots, and then you have the foundation. So is the foundation simply funding the others, or are you actually over those? So do the leaders of the PAC report to you? Do the leaders of the grassroots report to you? So that's why when I hear hierarchy, so I know what Melina's title is, but who does she report to? Or does she run that entity? Does that entity have its own board? Does the PAC have its own board? Or do they have their own infrastructure? That's why I'm saying it's still sort of like all these different pieces.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and hierarchy, and I know we are a decentralized movement, and so it is sometimes hard to talk about it in terms of hierarchy. But to answer your question, yeah, they are not all, so if you're looking at a map, they all have dotted lines next to each other, right? So they're their own autonomous organizations. The C3, which is the foundation, BLM GNF as a C3, we represent that board. We are that board. And then BLM Grassroots has its own organization and structure and governance. separate from the foundation. They do not, quote unquote, report to us. Melina Abdullah, as the director of BLM Grassroots, has a team that she works with, which is very separate from the governance structure of the foundation. And then that is the same for the PAC. The PAC currently, though, is sort of co-run by both members of Grassroots and the foundation. So an advisory board runs the PAC at this moment. And so Melina Abdullah sits on the advisory board. Angela Austin from BLM Michigan sits on the advisory board. And then, members of the foundation sit on the advisory board as well. But it is a separate organization, autonomous, has its own reporting structures, and a separate entity as well. It is organized as a PAC and not a C3. And just on the funding piece, apologies, the foundation cannot fund any PAC work. So no dollars from the foundation could ever or would ever go to the PAC. The foundation does support the grassroots work, right? When we say that grassroots is a pillar, as Cicely just mentioned, that not only includes BLM chapters that are recognized under BLM Grassroots, but all abolitionist organizations doing work on the front lines. However, sort of the entity that Sister Abdullah runs, the foundation does support and has invested its dollars into that organization. They have a separate bucket of money. You've heard reporting about our fiscal sponsorship at Tides Foundation, for example. The Tides Foundation is what houses the dollars for our grassroots organizing, which Melina and others within BLM Grassroots have access to.
I see a question about Patrisse. And the question, for those of you who haven't seen it, is can we discuss Patrisse Culler's movement with the organization, or involvement rather with the organization now? I will say, while Patrisse is always honored as a movement founder and one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement and hashtag, she stepped down last year. She has no legal connection to the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation. We, as the 3 board members, are leading the foundation.
Do we have any other questions? And Roland, you are absolutely correct. You've just summed it up even better than I could. All the organizations are related, but and siblings, but they have different leadership teams. BLM Grassroots houses the chapter work. So you will, they are in the process of onboarding chapters actually as we speak. So Melina could answer that question. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thanks a lot. It's the PAC arm, with what I just heard, I think, I'm not sure you can answer this, but I know the PAC arm was once upon a time involved in a bill by Ayanna Presley that on the federal level, and the bill didn't happen, but I'm just wondering, what, can you just tell me just the basics of the PAC, if you know them, which is how many staffers does the PAC have? Do you have a federal PAC and other PACs in the states? And just talk a little bit on the PAC if you can, what you know. Thanks a lot. Thank you for letting me ask another question.
Of course, yeah, the PAC, basically you think of it, the way that I like to explain it is, if we were to, how do we ensure that there are more elected officials like Cori Bush, right, who, spent her time as a protest activist and then was able to move to the halls of power? How do we build out build up a pipeline of Black activists, Black leaders, Black folks who can run for office and take the demands of the ecosystem, the movement at large, to the halls of power? And so we have done work in partnership with probably every member of the squad. We obviously are able to support people in their elections. We have supported many of Ayanna Pressley's bills. I think the bill you might be referring to may have been around, I'm thinking it may have been around the insurrection. That might be the bill that you're referring to, which we did a lot of work across the C3 on the lobbying side and on the PAC side around ensuring that we root out white supremacy, which was what the lead up to, which caused the insurrection, and ensuring that those who created January 6th were held accountable. So I think that was the Ayanna Pressley bill that you're referring to. And in terms of the staff of the PAC, right now, just like the C3, BLM, GNF, the foundation, we are working to build out the PAC. It was started right around the general election to ensure we booted Trump out of office. And it is in a very similar process as the Global Network Foundation in terms of building up its infrastructure, setting its long-term strategy, and ensuring that we've got the resources to do the work.
There was a question about an independent audit. We have undergone an independent audit, an external independent audit that will be uploaded to our Transparency Center. Dejanay and I asked that very same question and poured through those documents, having the opportunity to examine them as well. And so we absolutely have retained a firm to conduct an external and completely independent audit that will be uploaded and made public very soon.
And I just want to touch on the results of that. And the results of that independent audit were that we are in great financial health. If you're thinking about what an audit does, right? You have an independent auditor who looks through the books and gives an opinion at the end of that. And that opinion was that we sort of passed the test of the audit with flying colors. I'm really excited about that. And as Cicely mentioned, we are excited to release that on our Transparency Center. And so with that, I think, are there any last questions? And if not, I will close this out.
There's a question around, is the California home currently occupied? The California home is not being occupied. And the follow-up question is, how long are your Creator Fellowships? We're still building out our Creator Fellowship program and excited to share a lot more about that with you all.
Great. So I will just close out and say thank you all so much for, of course, taking the time to attend this roundtable. And in closing, really want to just emphasize that our job as board members of Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation is really to ensure that we are investing in organizing meant to turn the moral tide of the world against police and jails and prisons and violence. It is to ensure that Black people have everything they need, from housing to transportation, to breathable air and drinkable water. It is to create structures that allow for the fullness of Black joy to be experienced. It's to ensure that narratives around the globe are as abolitionist and Black as possible. It's to build an organization that's here for the long haul. One of the greatest social movements in history. Black Lives Matter will absolutely power and fund that work for generations to come. And I think we're all really excited about thinking about and strategizing about building cutting edge methods and accumulating resources to ensure the front lines are funded. $90 million is not enough to do that. And so we are going to continue to raise the funds to be able to do that work. But we, I think, are arguably in one of the most precarious moments in BLM history. This is the first time that the organization has been without one of its three founders. There are deep divisions within the Black community about our organization. White supremacists are targeting our leaders and activists in horrific ways. Our politicians really still haven't understood what we're doing and why we're doing it, and they've ignored our demands for centuries. And really, to add on top of all of that, many people want Black Lives Matter, not only as a movement, but as an organization, to end. But that is not going to happen. I would say that again, that is not going to happen. Black Lives Matter is here to stay. I'll admit we've had some trying years. We've not made everyone happy, but we're definitely not giving up on this experiment in radical Black philanthropy and powerful agitation, which is at the root of how Black Lives Matter was started. So although this is a moment of deep challenge, we see so much great potential. And something I think about often is that future that when the future freedom fighters, right, the future Patrices, the future Alicias, the future Opals, what they will think about. And we are trying to create something that will endure, that they will be grateful and thankful for, in the same ways that we've been thankful to our ancestors for their valiant struggle. So we hope that this is the beginning of a longer conversation in the months and years to come. And again, thank you all so much for taking the time. You can visit blacklivesmatter.com/transparency, which I think has been put in the chat already for more information. You can email press@blacklivesmatter.com if you have additional questions. And like I said, go ahead, Cicely.
Go ahead, DJ.
There's a question in the chat around, can you talk about the money given to Patrice's brother at security, how you will handle security going forward? And I know we've touched on this many times as the new board. And as Shalomia just mentioned, there were a lot of learning lessons that as a new foundation, Black Lives Matter has learned. And we are continuing to look over all of those learned lessons and figuring out how we could do it better in the future. And so we are planning to handle things differently moving forward.
And I'll just touch on that a little bit as well, if that's okay. I always like to give context to security, right? The leaders of the abolitionist movement have always been regarded as public enemies and treated accordingly. We know that what we are fighting for is dangerous because we are saying we don't believe in policing power. We are saying that white supremacy is evil. We are saying that white people have too much power. And that paints an automatic target on us and on the leaders of this organization. History tells us, of course, that abolitionism and those fighting for it have been routinely subjected to violence and capture and imprisonment and obviously death. And so we take security extremely seriously. And the amount of dollars that we spend on that will always reflect how we as a organization that houses and resources the dollars fund the security operations. But the piece that I see here is, can you talk about Patrice's brother? I just want to address that because it's important. And we're seeing lots of media reporting on it in ways that really don't tell the fullness of what happened. I think first, when we say, the mantra, we keep us safe, we mean that. It literally means our family, those we trust, those in community keep us safe, not the police. Most security firms, as you know, are former law enforcement, FBI, members of the state. They are also our enemy, right? So we went through a process where we evaluated who could keep our leaders safe, not just Patrice, but members within the organization, other activists on the ground. And Paul has over 27 years experience in security. He runs multiple firms dedicated to security, and he has kept high-level individuals secure for his, the duration of his career. And so he is very qualified. And so the qualification with that trust that we know is so important was what led us to onboarding Paul, and he still does currently serve as the organization's head of security. And I will just end by saying, the concept of having people and trust and have done work with in the past as employees or vendors and consultants within an organization or just on your team is not new. Every nonprofit and business operates in that way where you think about the people that you know and trust and who are qualified to do the work. And that's the exact same thing that transpired here.
Yeah, I'll add that when Sissy and I had the same question, and we learned that everything was above board, that he even as down to the payments, the same as a regular security. So everything was above board there. We had the same question around that. And also that, as Shalomi said, we see this all the time when you think about Donald Trump. He hired his everyone in the White House. So we see these things all the time, but because it's a Black-led organization, then it's picked apart. So I just had that.
All right. Well, I've already done my closing. So I would just say again, it's so good to be in community and fellowship with y'all. We look forward to doing this more often. Please don't hesitate to reach out with additional questions, and y'all have a blessed week. Thanks so much. Thank
you for your time. Thank you for your liberation of Black people and telling our stories.
Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.